Sarah Martinez had always been small for her age. At 22, she stood barely 5 feet tall and weighed less than most high school boys. Her delicate frame and quiet voice made people assume she was fragile, someone who needed protection, rather than someone who could provide it. The shooting range echoed with the sharp crack of gunfire as Sarah approached the counter. Behind the glass display of pistols and rifles, Jake Thompson looked up from cleaning a weapon. His weathered face showed the skepticism she had grown accustomed to seeing. "You sure you're in the right place, miss?" Jake asked, his tone not unkind but clearly doubtful. "We got a nice little .22 pistol that might be more your speed. Real gentle on the hands." Sarah had heard variations of this conversation, dozens of times. At gun stores, shooting ranges, even at the police academy where she had tried to enroll twice, only to be turned away before she could even take the physical fitness test. The rejection letters always used polite language about department requirements and physical standards, but the message was clear. "I'd like to try the AR-15, Sarah said quietly, pointing to the black rifle hanging on the wall behind him. Jake's eyebrows shot up. "That's a serious weapon, little lady. Got quite a kick to it. Most guys half again your size have trouble handling the recoil on their first try." He paused, studying her small hands. "You ever fired anything bigger than a cap gun?" Other customers in the shop turned to look. A group of men in camouflage jackets snickered among themselves. One of them, a burly man with a thick beard, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. $20 says she can't even hold it steady. "Enough to hit the target," he called out to his friends. "Look at those tiny arms, that rifle's gonna knock her flat on her back." Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her voice steady. "I'll take that bet," she said, turning to face the bearded man. "But let's make it interesting. $50 says I can outshoot you." The man laughed so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. "Honey, I've been shooting since before you were born. I was in the Marines for 8 years. But sure, I'll take your money. Easy $50. Jake looked uncomfortable with the situation developing in his shop. "Now hold on. I can't let some rookie go up against Mike here. He's one of our best shooters, won state competition 3 years running." "I can sign whatever waiver you need," Sarah said. "I understand the risks." The truth was, Sarah had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone knew. Growing up in a rough neighborhood in East Los Angeles, she had watched her older brother Tony practice with various weapons in their basement. He had been part of a gang before straightening out his life, but not before teaching his little sister everything he knew about firearms. Tony had seen something in Sarah that others missed. While she looked fragile, she had incredible focus and natural hand-eye coordination. More importantly, she had something to prove. Years of being overlooked and underestimated had created a burning determination inside her. "Your funeral," Mike said, still chuckling. "But I'll spot you some points, since it's your first time with a real gun." "No spots," Sarah replied. "Straight competition. Same target, same distance, same number of rounds." Jake reluctantly agreed to supervise the impromptu competition. Word spread quickly through the range, and soon a small crowd had gathered. Most of them seemed to think they were about to witness either a spectacular failure or a minor disaster. They moved to the indoor range, where Jake set up 2 targets at 50 yards. The standard police qualification course used closer distances, but Mike had insisted on making it challenging. He figured it would end the competition quickly and send the little girl home where she belonged. "Standard rules," Jake announced. 30 rounds each, all hits scored. Highest total wins. He looked at Sarah one more time. "You sure about this? No shame in backing out now?" Sarah picked up the AR-15, feeling its weight in her hands. It was heavier than she had expected, but not unmanageable. She had practiced with Tony's rifles, though never anything quite this powerful. The key, he had taught her, was not to fight the recoil, but to work with it. "Ladies first," Mike said with an exaggerated bow. Sarah ignored the theatrical gesture and stepped up to the firing line. The range fell silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. She raised the rifle, feeling dozens of eyes watching her every move. Some part of her mind registered the whispered comments behind her. "This is gonna be ugly. Should we call an ambulance? Poor kid doesn't know what she's gotten herself into." She blocked out the voices and focused on her breathing, just as Tony had taught her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Let the heartbeat steady. Find the natural pause between breaths where everything becomes still. The first shot surprised everyone, including Sarah. The rifle barked and jumped in her hands, but she controlled it better than anyone expected. Through the scope, she could see a clean hole in the target's outer ring. Not bad for a beginner, someone called out, but wait till she tries rapid fire. Sarah adjusted her stance slightly and fired again. This time the shot landed closer to center. Then another, each one more precise than the last. By her 10th shot, the crowd behind her had grown quiet. Mike's confident smirk had faded. He had assumed she would struggle just to keep the gun pointed downrange, but her grouping was tighter than many experienced shooters managed. Her small frame, which everyone thought would work against her, actually helped her maintain stability. When Sarah finished her 30 rounds, Jake called for a temporary ceasefire to check her target. The walk down range felt like the longest, 50 yards of her life. Behind her, she could hear Mike muttering to his friends about beginner's luck. Jake pulled down her target and held it up to the light. 28 out of 30 shots had found their mark, with most clustered in a tight group around the center ring. It was an impressive performance by any standard, let alone for someone supposedly firing an AR-15 for the first time. "Well, I'll be damned," Jake whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The range erupted in surprised chatter. Mike stepped forward to examine the target himself, his face showing a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. "Your turn," Sarah said simply, setting down the rifle with hands that barely trembled. Mike had been shooting competitively for 15 years. His basement was filled with trophies and his gun safe contained weapons worth more than most people's cars. He approached the firing line with the confidence of someone who had never been seriously challenged by an amateur. But as he raised his rifle, something felt different. The crowd that had been cheering him on was now silent, watching with the kind of attention usually reserved for close competitions between equals. The little girl had changed the dynamic, and Mike found himself actually nervous for the first time in years. His first shot went wide, clipping the edge of the target. A few people gasped, and Mike felt heat rise in his cheeks. He had been showing off, trying to make it look effortless, and had gotten sloppy with his fundamentals. He steadied himself and fired again. Better. The next shot was even more precise. By the time he finished his string of 30 rounds, Mike had recovered his composure and put together a respectable performance. Not his best work, but solid. Jake retrieved the target and examined it carefully. 26 hits out of 30, with a decent grouping around the center. Under normal circumstances, it would have been considered excellent shooting. 26 for Mike, Jake announced. Sarah wins with 28. The silence stretched for several seconds before someone started clapping. Soon, the entire range was applauding, though Mike noticed many of his buddies looked more stunned than celebratory. Mike walked over to Sarah, pulled out his wallet, and handed her $50. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" he asked, his voice missing its earlier mockery. "My brother taught me," Sarah said simply. She didn't mention the countless hours in the basement, the hundreds of rounds fired at makeshift targets, or the way Tony had pushed her to be perfect, because he knew the world wouldn't give her a second chance. "Your brother must be one hell of a teacher," Mike admitted. "Look, I owe you an apology. I judged you before you even picked up the gun." Sarah nodded, accepting the apology gracefully. But she could see in his eyes, and in the faces around her, that while they were impressed, they still saw her performance as an anomaly. One good day at the range didn't change their fundamental assumptions about what she was capable of. Jake, however, was thinking differently. He had owned the range for 20 years and had seen thousands of shooters. What Sarah had just demonstrated wasn't luck or a fluke. It was skill combined with natural talent, and he recognized it. "You looking for work?" he asked her as the crowd dispersed. Sarah's heart jumped. She had been job hunting for months, applying for positions in security, law enforcement, even private protection services. Every interview ended the same way: polite thanks and a promise to call that never came. "What kind of work?" "I need someone to help run the range, teach basic safety classes, maybe some private instruction." The pay isn't much to start, but it's honest work. Jake paused, studying her face. Course, you'd have to put up with a lot of what you saw today. Plenty of men come in here thinking they know everything about guns. Might be hard on someone your size. I can handle it, Sarah said, though part of her wondered if that was true. She started work the following Monday. The first week was exactly what Jake had warned her about. Male customers would ask to speak to someone who knows about guns, even after she had just finished explaining the technical specifications of various weapons. Others would pat her on the head and call her sweetheart, while asking where the real instructor was. But gradually, word spread about the small woman who could outshoot most men. Customers started specifically requesting lessons from her. Her classes filled up faster than the other instructors, and her students consistently scored higher on qualification tests. Sarah discovered she had a gift for teaching. Her small stature, which had been such a disadvantage in other situations, actually helped when working with nervous beginners. She wasn't intimidating like some of the larger male instructors, and her gentle voice put people at ease. More importantly, she understood what it felt like to be underestimated. When elderly women came in wanting to learn self-defense, or when young men arrived feeling embarrassed about their lack of experience, Sarah knew how to build their confidence. 3 months into the job, Jake called her into his office. Got a call today from the police department, he said, settling behind his desk. They're looking for civilian contractors to help with their training program. Seems they're having trouble with some of their recruits meeting marksmanship standards. Sarah's pulse quickened. The police department was the same one that had rejected her applications twice. They specifically asked about the instructor everyone's been talking about, Jake continued. The one who can put 30 rounds in a group the size of a dinner plate at 100 yards. What did you tell them? I told them you might be interested. In a meeting. If you want it, of course. Sarah thought about all the rejection letters, all the condescending looks, all the times she had been told she wasn't strong enough or big enough or tough enough for law enforcement. Set up the meeting, she said. The following Thursday, Sarah found herself sitting across from Captain Williams, the head of the department's training division. He was a tall man with graying hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent decades on the streets. I'll be honest, Miss Martinez, he said, looking over her resume. When Jake Thompson told me about you, I was skeptical. We've had instructors before who could shoot well but couldn't handle the pressure of training police officers. Sarah waited, knowing there was more coming. Our recruits are struggling. Last graduating class, 40% failed their firearms qualification on the first attempt. That's unacceptable. We need someone who can not only shoot but can teach others to shoot under stress. What kind of stress? Sarah asked. Captain Williams smiled for the first time since she had arrived. The kind that comes from knowing your life might depend on making the shot. The kind that makes your hands shake and your heart pound. The kind that separates the people who can shoot at paper targets from the people who can shoot when it matters. He leaned forward, studying her face. Jake says you're something special, but I need to see it for myself. You willing to demonstrate your skills for me and some of my training staff? Sarah nodded. When and where? Tomorrow morning. Our range, 7 a.m. sharp. He stood up, extending his hand. Fair warning, we won't be as friendly as the customers at Jake's place. We'll push you hard, and if you can't handle it, we'll send you home. As Sarah shook his hand, she felt the familiar fire burning in her chest. The same determination that had driven her to challenge Mike. The same refusal to be dismissed that had carried her through every rejection. I'll be there, she said. That night, Sarah called Tony to tell him about the opportunity. Her brother listened carefully, then was quiet for a long moment. You sure about this, Sarah? Police work is dangerous, even the training side. And you know how they feel about people like us. I'm sure, she said. This is what I've been working toward. Then, you better be ready to prove them all wrong again. The police training facility looked more like a military compound than a school. High fences topped with razor wire surrounded buildings designed for function rather than beauty. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, but the parking lot was already busy with officers arriving for the morning shift. Captain Williams met her at the front entrance along with 3 other men she hadn't seen before. Their expressions ranged from curious to openly skeptical. "This is Sergeant Morrison, our head firearms instructor," Williams said, indicating a stocky man with arms like tree trunks, "and Officers Bradley and Chen from our tactical training unit." Morrison looked Sarah up and down like he was examining a weapon that might be defective. "So you're the miracle shooter Jake's been telling everyone about," he said. "Hope you brought your appetite, because we're about to feed you a reality sandwich." The indoor range was larger and more sophisticated than anything Sarah had seen before. Multiple lanes extended out to varying distances, with computerized target systems and advanced lighting. This wasn't a place for weekend hobbyists. It was where professionals came to learn skills that would keep them alive. "Standard police qualification course first," Morrison announced, handing her a department-issued Glock 19. 60 rounds, various distances, time limits. You probably used rifles at Jake's place, but real cops carry pistols. Sarah examined the weapon. It was heavier than she preferred, with a longer trigger pull than she was used to, but the principles remained the same: breathing, stance, sight alignment, trigger control. The course was more challenging than anything she had encountered at Jake's range. Targets appeared and disappeared at random intervals. Some shots had to be made from behind barriers, others while moving. The time pressure was relentless. She had seconds to acquire each target and make precise shots. When the course ended, Morrison walked downrange to examine her targets with obvious reluctance. Sarah could see his expression change as he counted. "The holes. 58 out of 60, he announced, his voice flat. 2 shots just outside the scoring zone." Officer Chen whistled softly. "That's better than half our veteran officers manage." "Luck," Morrison said dismissively. "Let's see how she does when we add some real pressure." They moved to a different part of the facility, where the setup looked more like a movie set than a shooting range. There were mock storefronts, residential doors, and vehicle mock-ups. This was where officers trained for real-world scenarios. "Stress course," Morrison explained with obvious satisfaction. "You'll face multiple targets that appear without warning. Some are threats, some are innocent bystanders. You have to make split-second decisions while under physical and mental pressure." He pointed to a heavy vest hanging on a rack. "Put that on. Weighs about 30 pounds. Then you'll do 50 jumping jacks, run a quarter mile, and immediately begin the course. We'll be shouting commands and distractions the entire time." Sarah strapped on the weighted vest, feeling its bulk restrict her movement. The other men watched with expressions that suggested they expected her to quit before she even started. The physical preparation was brutal. By the time Sarah finished the run, her heart was pounding and sweat was dripping into her eyes. Her legs felt shaky, and the weighted vest made every breath a struggle. "Go!" Morrison shouted. The course was chaos. Targets popped up from doorways, windows, and around corners. Some showed armed criminals, others depicted police officers or civilians. Sarah had to identify each one and make an instantaneous decision about whether to shoot. All the while, the instructors screamed conflicting orders designed to break her concentration. "Suspect on your left. Check your 6. Reload. Reload. Officer down. Where's your backup?" Sarah forced herself to block out the noise and focus on what Tony had taught her. In high-stress situations, you fall back on your training. Muscle memory takes over when conscious thought becomes impossible. She moved through the course methodically, engaging threats while avoiding innocent targets. The weighted vest made everything harder, but she adapted, using walls and barriers for support when possible. When the final target disappeared, Sarah stood in the center of the course, breathing heavily and waiting for the evaluation. Morrison and the others walked through the course, checking each target. They conferred in whispers that Sarah couldn't hear over her own heartbeat. Finally, Captain Williams approached her. 47 out of 50 targets engaged correctly. 0 hits on civilian targets. Time was competitive with our best tactical officers. Morrison looked like he had swallowed something unpleasant. "Could be a fluke," he muttered. "One good day. Doesn't prove anything." "Then let's make it interesting," Williams said. "Sarah, would you be willing to demonstrate your skills against our best instructors? Say, a competition course that really separates the experts from the amateurs?" Before Sarah could answer, Morrison stepped forward. I'll take that challenge, but let's make it worth something. If she wins, I'll personally recommend her for our advanced instructor program. If she loses, she walks away and stops wasting our time. Agreed, Sarah said without hesitation. They moved to yet another section of the facility, where a complex course had been set up with moving targets, obstacles, and multiple firing positions. This wasn't training anymore. It was a demonstration of elite-level shooting skills. Morrison went first, attacking the course with the confidence of someone who had designed many of the drills himself. His performance was flawless, fast, accurate, and efficient. When he finished, his time and accuracy scores were posted on an electronic board. Your turn, little lady, he said, not bothering to hide his smugness. Sarah approached the starting line, aware that word of the competition had spread. Officers were gathering to watch, some placing informal bets on the outcome. She could hear fragments of conversation. Morrison's never lost one of these challenges. $20 says she doesn't even finish the course. This is gonna be ugly. Sarah tuned out the voices and focused on the course layout. Morrison had been fast, but she noticed he had chosen the most direct routes between targets. Sometimes the fastest path wasn't the smartest one. Timer starts on your movement, Williams announced. Sarah exploded from the starting line, but instead of following Morrison's route, she chose a different path that allowed her to engage multiple targets from a single position. Her smaller size let her use cover more effectively, and her different approach confused the observers who had expected her to simply copy Morrison's technique. The course required precise shooting while moving, reloading under pressure, and transitioning between different types of targets. Sarah's breathing technique and mental focus served her well as she moved through each challenge. When she finished, the electronic timer showed a result that made several officers check their watches to make sure the equipment was working properly. Time beats Morrison by 12 seconds, Williams announced. Perfect score on target engagement. The range fell silent. Morrison stared at the scoreboard like it was displaying impossible information. Run it again, he said. Equipment malfunction. Nobody shoots that clean on their first try through our advanced course. Morrison, Williams said quietly. That's enough. But Sarah was already walking back to the starting line. No problem, she said. I'll run it again. The second run through the course was even more impressive than the first. Sarah had memorized the target sequence and optimized her movement pattern. This time, she shaved another 8 seconds off her time while maintaining perfect accuracy. Morrison stood speechless as the electronic board displayed results that would have been competitive in national police competitions. Around the range, officers who had come to watch what they expected to be an amusing failure were now talking in hushed, respectful tones. Captain Williams walked over to Sarah as she set down her weapon. In 25 years with this department, I've never seen shooting like that. Morrison here holds every range record we have, and you just beat him by 20 seconds. It's a good course, Sarah said, removing her eye protection. Challenging. But fair. The targets are well positioned to test real-world skills. Morrison finally found his voice. How? He asked. I mean, no disrespect, but you're half my size and you've got no formal law enforcement training. How did you move through that course like you'd been doing it for years? Sarah considered her answer carefully. She could talk about the hours, in Tony's basement, about growing up in a neighborhood where awareness and quick reflexes weren't optional. Instead, she chose honesty. I've been underestimated my whole life, she said. Every time someone tells me I can't do something, it just makes me work harder to prove them wrong. Plus, being small has advantages. I can use cover you might not. Fit behind, and I don't need as much space to move efficiently. Williams nodded thoughtfully. What would you say to starting as an advanced instructor? Skip the basic training program and go straight to teaching our tactical officers and SWAT candidates? Sarah felt her heart racing again, but this time from excitement rather than exertion. I'd say, when do I start? Next Monday. We'll start you with individual coaching sessions for officers who are struggling with qualification standards. If that goes well, we'll move you up to advanced tactical training. Morrison stepped forward, extending his hand. Looks like I'll be working with you instead of against you. Fair warning, I don't go easy on new instructors, even ones who can outshoot me. I wouldn't want you to, Sarah replied, shaking his hand firmly. The following Monday, Sarah arrived at the training facility wearing the instructor uniform Williams had provided. It was the first time in her life she had worn any kind of official uniform, and she felt both proud and nervous. Her first student was Officer Rebecca Hayes, a 5-year veteran who had been struggling with accuracy under stress. Hayes was a good street cop but had failed her last 2 qualification tests. "So you're the new hotshot instructor," Hayes said, her tone guarded. "Hope you're better than the last 3 guys they had me work with. I'm starting to think I'm hopeless." Sarah studied Hayes' stance and grip as she fired at the target. The problems were subtle but significant. She was jerking the trigger slightly and not following through with her shots. "You're not hopeless," Sarah said. "You're just fighting the gun instead of working with it. Here, try this." She demonstrated a modified grip that would work better with Hayes' hand size and shooting style. Then she showed her a breathing technique that would help maintain focus during high-stress situations. "The key is consistency," Sarah explained. "Same grip, same stance, same breathing pattern every single time. When your adrenaline is pumping and your heart is racing, you fall back on whatever you've trained your body to do automatically." Hayes' shooting improved dramatically within the first hour. By the end of the 2-hour session, she was hitting targets she had been missing consistently for months. "I can't believe it," Hayes said, examining her target. "What was I doing wrong before?" "Nothing major," Sarah said. "Just small adjustments that make a big difference over time. Practice these techniques for the next 2 weeks and you'll pass your qualification easily." Word spread quickly through the department about the new instructor's effectiveness. Officers who had been dreading remedial training began requesting sessions with Sarah. Her schedule filled up rapidly as she worked with everyone from rookies to veteran detectives. Captain Williams watched her progress with growing amazement. Sarah's students weren't just passing their qualification tests, they were achieving scores that put them in the top tier of the department. 3 months into her new position, Williams called Sarah into his office for her first formal evaluation. "You know, students' qualification scores have improved by an average of 35%, he said, reading from a report. 5 officers who were facing dismissal for poor marksmanship are now scoring in the department's top 20%. Sarah felt a flush of pride but tried to remain professional. They were good officers who just needed the right instruction. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps. "It's more than that," Williams said. "You've got a gift for this work, which brings me to why I called you in here." He pulled out a folder marked confidential and set it on his desk. "We've got a situation developing. You know about the Meridian Avenue gang wars that have been heating up over the past few months?" Sarah nodded. The violence had been front-page news for weeks as 2 rival gangs fought for control of drug territory. Intelligence suggests we're looking at a major escalation, maybe involving military-grade weapons and tactics. We need to be prepared for scenarios our officers have never faced. Williams opened the folder, revealing photos of weapons and tactical equipment that looked more like military hardware than typical street gang supplies. "I'm forming a special training unit to prepare our tactical teams for worst-case scenarios. I want you to head up the marksmanship component. It would mean working with our most elite officers, preparing them for situations where perfect shooting isn't just preferred. It's the difference between going home to their families or not." Sarah looked at the photos, recognizing several weapons from her time with Tony. Assault rifles, armor-piercing ammunition, even what appeared to be military-style body armor. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" she asked. "We need the training program operational within 6 weeks. 50 officers need to be ready for deployment against opponents who may be better armed and more ruthless than anything we've encountered before." Sarah thought about her journey from the rejected police academy applicant to this moment. 6 months ago, no one would have trusted her to train a single officer. Now she was being asked to prepare the department's best for its most dangerous mission. "I'll need access to advanced equipment and ammunition," she said. "And I'll want to design scenarios that simulate the actual threats we might face." "Whatever you need," Williams said. "Budget is unlimited, lives are on the line." As Sarah left Williams's office, She realized her life had changed completely in just a few months. The small woman who had been told she couldn't handle the recoil of a rifle was now responsible for training elite officers who would soon face the most dangerous criminals in the city. She thought about calling Tony to share the news, but decided to wait. There would be time to celebrate after she had proven herself once again. For now, she had work to do and lives to prepare for the ultimate test. The special training facility Sarah designed looked like a war zone. She had worked with department engineers to create scenarios that would prepare officers for urban combat against heavily armed opponents. Abandoned cars provided cover, buildings offered multiple levels of engagement, and computerized targets could simulate enemies who shot back. Her 50 selected officers were the department's elite, SWAT team leaders, tactical specialists, and veteran detectives with exemplary records. Most of them had initially been skeptical about training under someone they viewed as an outsider, but Sarah's reputation had preceded her. "Listen up," Sarah announced to the assembled officers on the first day of training. "Everything you think you know about police shootouts is about to be challenged. The intelligence we've received suggests our opponents have military training and access to weapons that can penetrate standard body armor." She gestured to a display of confiscated weapons that intelligence had recovered from similar gang conflicts in other cities. "These aren't street criminals with Saturday night specials. These are organized, well-equipped combatants who have been preparing for war with law enforcement. We need to be ready for sustained firefights, not quick arrests." Officer Martinez, a 10-year SWAT veteran, raised his hand. "What kind of engagement distances are we looking at?" "Anywhere from point blank to 300 yards, Sarah replied. "Urban environments, limited visibility, multiple shooters and civilians in the area. You'll need to be able to make precision shots while under fire, often while protecting non-combatants." Over the following weeks, Sarah pushed the officers through increasingly complex scenarios. She introduced them to advanced shooting positions, stress fire techniques, and tactical reloading under pressure. The training was exhausting and dangerous. Even with safety protocols, several officers sustained minor injuries from the realistic combat simulations. But the results were remarkable. Officers who had been excellent marksmen under controlled conditions learned to maintain their accuracy while rappelling from buildings, engaging multiple targets simultaneously, and making split-second decisions about when to shoot and when to hold fire. Sarah's small size became an unexpected advantage in designing the training scenarios. She could demonstrate shooting techniques from positions that larger instructors couldn't access, showing her students how to use every available piece of cover effectively. "Remember," she would tell them during the most intense drills, "your size doesn't determine your effectiveness. Your preparation and mindset do. I may be smaller than any of you, but I can outshoot most of you, because I've accepted that I have to be better, not bigger." 3 weeks into the program, Captain Williams brought disturbing news. "Intelligence has confirmed the Meridian Avenue situation is escalating faster than expected," he told Sarah during a private briefing. "We may be looking at deployment within the next 2 weeks. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Her officers were improving rapidly, but most tactical training programs took months to complete properly. "Are they ready?" Williams asked bluntly. Sarah considered the question carefully. In terms of technical shooting skills, her officers were now among the best she had ever trained. But combat effectiveness involved more than just marksmanship. "They're as ready as I can make them in this time frame," she said. "But I'd like to run one final exercise, a comprehensive scenario that tests everything they've learned. Whatever you need." Sarah spent the next 2 days designing the most challenging training scenario she could imagine. It would involve all 50 officers, multiple objectives, civilian rescues, and sustained combat against superior numbers. She called it Operation Crucible. The exercise began at dawn on a Saturday morning. Sarah had arranged for the department's helicopter to provide air support, and she had positioned herself in the chopper's observation seat to coordinate the entire operation. The scenario was complex. A fortified gang stronghold with hostages, multiple escape routes, and heavily armed defenders. The 50 officers had to work as coordinated teams to secure the perimeter, rescue civilians, and neutralize threats without excessive casualties. From her aerial vantage point, Sarah watched. Her students implement the tactics she had taught them. They moved with precision and confidence, adapting to changing situations and supporting each other under pressure. But halfway through the exercise, something went wrong. A communications failure left one team isolated and under heavy simulated fire. Standard protocol called for the exercise to be suspended, but Sarah made a split-second decision. "Put me down on that rooftop," she told the pilot, pointing to a building near the trapped officers. "Ma'am, that's not safe. The exercise isn't designed for instructor intervention." "Do it," Sarah ordered. Minutes later, Sarah was rappelling from the helicopter onto a rooftop overlooking the trapped officers. She carried a modified AR-15 loaded with training ammunition that could register hits on the computerized targets without causing injury. From her elevated position, Sarah could see the entire tactical situation. The computer-controlled enemy targets had been programmed to be more aggressive than usual, and they had effectively pinned down 6 of her best officers. Sarah began engaging the targets with methodical precision. Her elevated position gave her angles that the trapped officers couldn't access, and her smaller profile made her harder for the automated targeting systems to acquire. She worked systematically through the targets, using the shooting techniques she had perfected over months of training. Each shot was carefully aimed, accounting for distance, wind, and the movement of the computerized opponents. Below, the trapped officers realized what was happening. Instead of waiting for rescue, they began coordinating with Sarah's suppressive fire to advance on their objectives. The exercise concluded with all objectives achieved and